Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Michael and Patty Show. I'm Michael.
And I'm Patty.
Welcome to the caffeinated version here on this beautiful summer day looking out at the Charlottetown Yacht Club in Prince Edward Island, Canada. This show we cover PEI real estate and just real estate in general, because real estate's basically the same thing all over the USA and Canada. So hopefully you'll learn something. If not, listen to the past 143 episodes, and there must be a tidbit or two you can pick up on. So today we're getting into something that should be fairly lucrative for people that haven't even considered buying a investment property or moving to or looking for a cottage, recreational, or farm or business anywhere else than where they're living and looking at PEI. So today we're just going to talk about the residential stats. These are all in Canadian dollars. You can convert them into US. Americans will get an excellent deal as the exchange is usually in their favor. So in PEI today, real quick, home sales are down 8.9%, keeping in mind our stats are pretty small numbers, 216 units versus 237 in 2025. New listings down 4.6%, 440 versus 461. The market is, and you need to pay attention to this, everyone doing open houses thinking that this is the golden nugget that's going to sell your house, and it's not. It's just going to pacify you as a home seller and probably produce nothing. Also, all you people that went on the market way too high, and now you have that nice, shiny, new, fancy, new price sign out front, which basically tells us what?
It was overpriced to begin with.
Right. So the market is balanced. No longer is it COVID times. No longer can you ask $300,000 more for your $500,000 house. The purchasers have clued in.
And it's a balanced market as it pertains to the entire island and the residential market. However, if you start to get into more hyper-local or a more niche market, whether you're just looking at cottages or just looking at land, please know that that may sway a little bit. It may be balanced market in favor of buyers, balanced market in favor of sellers. So ask these questions of your agent and hopefully they're able to provide an answer to you and a concrete answer, not just a bunch of fluff or anything.
So the benchmark price, according to this, and these are the June 2026 stats, is up 1.4%. So if you look at it versus inflation, I'm not sure the inflation rate is. Usually it's somewhere between 1 and 2. You may actually be breaking even or losing money based on that benchmark price. This is your typical house, and your typical house in PEI in Canadian dollars is $383,300. And it was $377,900 in June 2025. Let's move along unless you have anything else.
Nope, let's keep this moving.
We'll toss that sheet in the back seat. On realtor.ca, and I'm sure this is on realtor.com in the States, there's a button there that every trigger-happy mouse owner likes to click on. It's send me more information. Well, I had one of these this week. This has been going on for decades. And I replied. It was a very simple listing. I said, so what information are you looking for? And that was the end of that communique.
You never received anything back?
Of course not.
Yeah.
I think I perplexed them. I think they're expecting a 200-page brochure and 5 videos and mapping, and I don't know what they're looking for. Personally, I think they're probably drinking a couple cold beers behind their computer in their nice lazy boy chair, and it seemed like a good thing to do at that point because they were dreaming about moving to the island.
Yes. So just when you look at that and dissect it, it's very easy, like your intro to this topic. You're just clicking on a box, and then it automatically gets sent to that particular listing agent, listing brokerage. And it's a very quick thing. You can do that within a couple of seconds. However, the response can take anywhere from 5 minutes to, and if there's a question or two speckled in there, it can take sometimes up to 15 minutes to a half an hour sometimes to put everything together. However, what you did was you put it back on them to actually have to do a little bit of work as well, and they weren't interested in doing any work, which work consists of send me a little bit more information. What specific questions do you possibly have with regards to this property? And not even having to get into anything else about who you are, what you're doing, but that required work. So therefore, that's why a lot of times, if you're wondering just what it's like on the real estate agent side, why, if you do send a simple response back like that, Michael, you never hear back because you were asking them to put a little bit of time, invest a little more energy or effort into it, and they weren't willing to do that. But they were okay asking you to do it.
So if you're going to click that box and there's a section to comment, maybe ask some questions that are relevant. Maybe tell us about you. Are you looking today, tomorrow? Is this a dream? Do you have to buy within 24 hours? What this essentially is some brainiac computer programmer at realtor.ca in Canada, realtor.com in the States thought, oh, this would be a great lead generator to send me more information. So they may include their phone number. A lot of times they don't, which gives the opportunity for an agent to call them and see if they're actually a serious buyer. So I understand the intent, but I also understand that you just need, sending somebody saying, I need more information isn't helpful.
Oh, absolutely. And in my opinion, if someone were to click on that, yes, provide a number. And if you are an agent and you receive this, call that number. Don't just respond behind your computer with an email. Call them. Reach out to them. Let them know that they're important and that you want to make sure that you provide an exceptional real estate service for them.
And if they call you, let's say they call you at 11:30 at night, make sure you call them at 2 a.m. in the morning if they're in a different time zone. That way you can make sure they're at home and receptive to your phone call.
Yes, because that would be technically 6 a.m. if it was, say, BC time. And that does happen often.
Patty, you've heard of people going to sell their house or their land or whatever. Just stick to houses for all intents and purposes for this discussion. I've come up with a formula, and it's a really simple one, and I think you're really going to like this. A lot of times people will talk to their friends, family, and neighbors, which probably know absolutely diddly squat about real estate, but for some reason this is their source of knowledge. And of course, they'll all say, oh, you need to interview a bunch of different agents and see what price they come up with. Or they'll say, go with the person that gives you the biggest price. In other words, the agent that's buying your listing, telling you that $600,000 home is worth $850 and getting you all excited. Well, I've come up with a rule that you can apply for interviewing agents, and this rule goes back decades since I've been in real estate. And you're coming up to 2 decades.
Mm-hmm.
Soon we'll be able to say combined experience over 50 years.
We would be, yeah.
The question usually arises when the agent comes in and he or she pulls a number out of the air. They walk into the house, they've never seen the house. In some cases, they've never been past the front door, and already they're giving you a number of what they feel the house is worth. Well, if you check whatever AI agent you want or check any research you want, say through the National Association of Realtors in the States, you will find these numbers that, and there's a technical term for this, you may be familiar with it, Patty, a number pulled out of their ass. Surprisingly, is extremely inaccurate, and according to the research that I did preliminarily before presenting this topic, can be off anywhere between 5 and 25%. Agents and brokers look at a lot of houses, and the chances of them getting your number right, just walking in the door, or even after a 10 or 15 or an hour walk wandering through the house and the property, the chances of that number coming in accurately is basically zero. So these agents here, you kick them out of the house.
Yeah, because you don't want to guesstimate as to what they think your property would be worth. And just with regards with what you were saying, Michael, I 100% agree with, they've never seen the inside of the home. How can they don't know your finishes. They don't know the condition of the home. They don't know perhaps if there's been any improvements or if things are starting maybe to deteriorate and fall apart, because it can work both ways. even if there was MLS history on that property, again, that would give them a bit of a guesstimate number or at least something to kind of work from. But you still should not be able to walk in that door. I cannot, and I'm on my 17th year in real estate, and I cannot walk into a home and go, yeah, here's a few cut sheets or property feature sheets that I brought on property similar to yours. This is about what you could expect to get for this property. I do not do that. My clients who are listeners of this podcast know I do not do that. Even when they do try to push, going, come on, you've seen lots of houses. What's your gut tell you? I still will not engage in that because I don't want to give them a guesstimate. I want to give them, which is what I was called in and hopefully hired to do, is to give them a fair market value evaluation or an equity evaluation. And that is what I end up delivering at the end of the day. I am not interested in playing the who gives me the highest number, because that guess number that they've given you is going to work against you, and you're going to end up finding yourself not only with a brand new shiny new price sign, but a lot of times the seller will end up thinking, well, why didn't you sell it? You told me it was worth X amount of dollars and now it's not selling. There's a brand new brokerage sign on your front lawn, because now you're having to restart the whole process again because the relationship has gone kind of sideways. There's bitter feelings between, the seller and their agent because they're frustrated and they need to get rid of you in order to feel that fresh energy on a new listing and start the process over again.
One of the things we've always recommended is just get an appraisal done, because it's an uninvolved, unbiased third party that has nothing to gain from giving you a low or high number. When you hire an agent or a broker, their motivation is to get the listing, and that's why a lot of them will buy this listing or be super sucky up to. Is that a word or a sentence?
I don't know, but you've come up with a few here.
They become their best friend, which brings me to my next point. You'll get something like, my wife likes him. This is business. This isn't about liking or disliking your agent or your broker. This is about the person that's going to do the best job to market your property, get you the most amount of money in the least amount of time with the least amount of aggravation, which is where the experience comes in. Imagine calling an appraiser, paying them $500. The appraiser looks at a couple pictures of the house or maybe walks through it, takes them a couple minutes and says, well, I think it's probably worth $675. Would you feel that $300, $400, $500 you paid for that appraisal was worth it?
No, and that's a really good point.
Well, thank you. So basically what an appraiser does, which is what the agents should be doing, and I have to step back just for a minute. Why do agents pull numbers out of their ass? Laziness.
Well, yes.
It's easy. It's got to be worth this. When I started real estate, I don't think I've ever heard so much ridiculous nonsense where agents and brokers would pull numbers from thin air. I would get back behind my computer. Back then, we would use an abacus and try to correlate or reconcile the numbers that they had spewed off from the top of their head with reality, and very rarely, if ever, did they reconcile. So an appraiser is going to look for subject properties, usually 3, compare them, and then take each property and do debits or credits, pluses or minuses based on features of that property. For instance, one has a garage. That might be an adjustment for $7,000. One has 2 acres rather than 1. That might be an adjustment. They may give an adjustment for bathrooms, bedrooms, square footage, condition, whatever the case may be, but they're going to show you, just like in grade 4, show me the math. That's what you expect or should expect out of an agent, not someone that walks in the house, plays all buddy, and tells you how cute your dog is and your cat, but actually shows you facts to say this is how the market is presenting the position of the value of your property. Make sense?
Yep, 100% makes sense.
Anything else we have to cover after we beat that to death?
Nope. I think you covered it quite well.
Get an appraisal is the last point. Moving on, I'm going to let you cover this one. Patty has come up with a magnificent trick For anyone that owns a pickup truck, you know, anytime somebody is moving, anytime someone has bought a big screen TV or an abundance of stuff at a store, all of a sudden you're everybody's best friend because you have a pickup truck. Patty's come up with the solution for this, and maybe you can share it with our audience, what you can do when you own a pickup truck and somebody asks you to help them move.
This is not my idea. I dragged Michael. We had a meeting one day this week, and I basically, in his opinion, kidnapped him because I needed to go through the car wash. I had a lot of bugs in that on my windshield. So it just allowed us to just continue to have conversation. Well, all of a sudden, Michael came up with this brainiac idea. I know how to get people to stop wanting to borrow the truck. And I said, how? And he said, I'm just going to take the truck through the car wash with all their stuff in the back so that I deliver it back to them soaking wet and they'll never ask me again. And I said, well, it's actually kind of a good idea if you needed to wash the upholstery or anything like that. So this is just being silly. But yes, Michael felt that by bringing their content, whatever they want you to move or transport, just bring it through the car wash and guarantee they're never going to ask you again to move their stuff.
What I actually said, I was doing them a service and throwing in a free cleaning.
Okay.
Moving along, Patty, I'll let you cover these next two topics.
PEI culture shock. Islanders will slam on, and I've witnessed this a few times in the last month, especially since the weather's been really nice. So they'll be driving and to assume that, how would I come to the conclusion that they're an islander or an island resident? Obviously, they have the PEI license plate, and that's how I'm formulating my opinion on this.
To be a rental?
It could be a rental, but most rentals usually have Nova Scotia plates, more times than not. But I've actually witnessed, and I knew these people that I was following, so I know they're true islanders. They were driving at a fair speed. They were going a bit above the speed limit. And as soon as they drove by those signs that, red flag, those little flashing screens, too fast. And if you're driving the speed limit, it gives you a reward with a happy face. These few particular islanders, as soon as they seen the sign, they quickly decreased their speed to align to make sure they were doing the speed limit. And they maintained that speed for probably about a kilometer or so on the other side before they decided they were going to start accelerating again. So very interesting. And I never thought there would be I just always thought they were just silly. Yes, it's an external way to correct yourself, remind you that, I didn't realize I am going a little bit fast. I need to correct my speed. They really do work. They really do correct people's speeds, help them self-police themselves, if you will. But they only seem to last for about a kilometer or so, and then the person picks up again.
What I was referring to actually is when I first moved here, I would be driving along the highway, say in a 90 kilometer an hour zone, doing about 102. And all of a sudden, the car in front of me would slam their brakes on, although there was nothing in front of them. And I asked the person I was with, I said, why are they slamming the brakes on? Oh, because there's a speed limit sign. So when it went from 90 down to 80, they would slam their brakes on to conform with that sign.
Really?
That's what I was referring to, not the digital signage.
Well, the digital signage is what I just experienced in the last couple weeks or so. But they do only last for approximately a kilometer or so before they end up deciding that their foot got a little heavy again and they start picking up the pace.
Patty, tell us about historical roads, and not just historical roads, because it only found between 11 and 16, but there's also something I thought of on the way here before we recorded our podcast, and that would be discontinued roads. This is new to you, but there are a number of groups. There's the PEI Jeepers. I think they're still around. There's also a number of other groups on Facebook that just love traversing these old roads.
Yeah, this is new, and I did not know this existed. So I have learned something new today. being July 2026, and it's always fun to learn something new, and that's what this podcast is all about. So I'm just going to cover this exactly as it is so I don't add a bunch of extra verbiage to it all. Prince Edward Island has 11 officially designated scenic heritage roads, often referred to as 16 in some historical counts. These are preserved, unpaved, red clay lanes protected from asphalt paving, heavy logging, and winter snow plowing to maintain the island's 18th century countryside aesthetic. I absolutely love this.
You're welcome.
So it just says
I invented it.
Get out your Jeep and participate in exploring some of PEI's historical roads. Just, again, this is the season to do this. You can't do this in the off season because the roads are nice and dry and hard, and you'll be able to enjoy the red clay.
Not only that, but you become an expert like myself at backing up for miles with your vehicle, finding that the road gets thinner and thinner and thinner and then basically dissipates into the forest. There's nowhere to turn around, so you get very good at backing up for 2, 3, 4 miles.
You've
been in the vehicle a few times with me. We'll go down a laneway even in the winter, can't turn around. Next thing you know, you're backing up a hill backwards to get out.
That is one thing I would say. I became very good as a reverse driver living on Prince Edward Island. I don't think I would have ever developed these skills in Ontario and Alberta in all my years living in those two provinces as I have here as a result of that. And there is no place to turn around. You are stuck going in reverse, just like Lightning McQueen or the Cars movie Mater, the tow truck. And I don't even think a tow truck would go back there to get you. So keep that in mind when you're heading down some of these tracks.
So you can look for, just closing this subject, there is a historical road map. There are historical maps of PEI, which will cover the historical roads, but they'll also cover the discontinued roads. Keeping in mind these discontinued roads will be extremely helpful, teaching you how to back up for miles and miles in your vehicle, because many of them just disappear into brush. Moving along here, it's tourist season, and of course we're usually getting the normal phone calls, and I had this 3 days ago. Someone saying, well, I'm leaving tomorrow afternoon at 2, and I'm looking at 2 houses. I'm looking at one, say, hypothetically in West Covehead, and I want to see your listing in Muscush. What's wrong with this equation, Patty?
Well, they're usually calling the listing agent? One, it's a panic, and they're not serious buyers. So you're causing a lot of undue stress on a seller because a lot of the properties are owner occupied. So they put in a great deal of time and energy preparing the home for a showing, only to not have a serious buyer. And they could have been enjoying, because we don't have long summers here, they could have been out enjoying the summer sun and doing other things instead of preparing a home for a viewing that they got their hopes up high that this could be their potential buyer, wasted a whole day of their life. And here you weren't serious.
But the biggest thing is, and I explained this to this particular person, I said, the listing agent is not the person to show you that house because they represent the homeowner. They don't represent you. And anything you say, just like in a court of law, like you see in the movies, can and will be held against you. They represent the home seller unless otherwise documented to the contrary. So get a buyer's agent. Don't book your showings a day before or half a day before you leave, and make sure you're qualified so you're not wasting homeowners' time and energy preparing a house for someone that's disingenuous.
Yeah, and the other thing is, while you're going through the process, you may assume you real estate agents, I know some just go, well, I can do just as good of a job, or I'm going to start, I don't have a realtor. I haven't decided who I want to work with. I am just going to go look at some homes. I think I'm pretty savvy. I think I have a business sense. I'll be able to go through the homes and make that decision myself. The problem with that formula is when you do end up finding an agent, and let's say one of these homes you were interested in, you had viewed with the listing agent at that time, you probably shared information with that listing agent. Guess what that listing agent's responsibility is? It's to share that information with their sellers. So you just, without realizing, negotiated against yourself by establishing a little bit, because you feel guilty. You're just going in and, you think, well, that's what they get paid for. The listing agent should be showing me the property. That's all part of their job. Well, that's not exactly how it works. And whoever writes the contract as per, our rules and that should be the one that took you through the property. So by going to each listing agent, you are actually sabotaging yourself from actually negotiating a good contract. And if you do decide to work with that agent, that listing agent, because you think, oh, I'm going to get a really good deal and they're going to be on both sides, because people have the same mindset. And we covered this on a previous episode about using the pros and cons of using the same law firm or lawyer. They think they're going to get a better deal. And that is just not the case. And again, the listing agent has a responsibility to share the information, although they do go into a limited dual agency, which is a whole other conversation and topic.
We're seeing in real estate, both in the States and Canada, states and provinces, the most advanced ones, because there's always states and provinces that are like way ahead of their time, are not allowing agents to represent both sides because it is a massive conflict of interest, just like a lawyer representing the husband and the wife at the same time. How can you possibly be fighting for the wife if you're going against the husband or vice versa? Well, it's the same with real estate. How can I be representing the vendors or the owners trying to get a high price and a good deal for them when the purchaser is looking for a low price and a bunch of contingencies the vendor doesn't want? So that's why it's being made illegal. And I think the sooner they bring it here, the better.
Yeah, I will say with regards to that.
And of course, if I may interrupt you just for 1 second, and the agent, all they can see is dollar signs because they're doubling their commission. So rather than getting $12,000 to sell a house, now they're getting 24.
Yeah, I just want to say this. I just want the listeners' takeaway. If you assume as a buyer you're going to be able to get a better deal with the listing agent, I'm going to tell you, if the listing agent is doing their job properly, there is no deal to be had. They cannot, as it pertains to price, negotiate anything. They can't negotiate on behalf of the seller. They can't negotiate on behalf of the buyer. So you are blindly navigating your way through, because a good listing agent who follows the rules on this, on agency law, will just say, I'm sorry, but as it pertains to price, I am just a facilitator. You tell me what price you want to put down. You put down that number on a piece of paper on your agreement of purchase and sale. Now you're back to the seller. The seller says, okay, well, what do you think on price? Well, I'm sorry, I can't advise you on price because now I'm on both sides. So you're going to have to come up with whether or not you want to counter this price. And sometimes the seller will just accept the buyer's first price, or sometimes the seller negotiates again against themselves, comes in higher, and it's just not a good idea, not good business practice.
Patty, when I first started real estate, one of the funniest things I ever heard, and I still hear it today from agents, because obviously it's a formula that's proven to be successful, is the I got a buyer. Have you heard this before?
Yes, I have.
Where the real estate agent phones up the home seller. In all likelihood, the house was on the market, now it's expired, withdrawn, whatever, was on the market, now it's not. So they phone them up and I got a buyer. You know what I say to those agents?
What?
I say, bring over the contract, it's sold, and bring over a couple bottles of champagne, assuming I drank alcohol. It's party time. They got a buyer.
Yes.
Let's see the contract. Inevitably, there's never a contract. Never has been. I've never seen one. What they're looking for is looking for two things. They're looking to either list the house and show it to someone that may or may not be qualified, or they're looking to double-end it. So in some cases, and I've seen this within the last few years, yes, they've got a buyer. They're more than happy to sell your $850,000 house for $500,000, have a quick sale, double-end their commission.
Yeah, I have a buyer. Who am I representing if I'm the buyer's agent and I just went to a seller that, like you had said, you approached the seller, whether they're listing had expired or whatever the situation is. And there's all rules on that. But anyways, we'll just keep this simple right now. And as a seller, you get all excited thinking, oh, this person has a buyer. My agent never produced a buyer. I'm going to go ahead and list with you. Please ask yourself as a seller, who is that agent representing? Are they representing you? They already have the rapport, obviously, with the buyer. So are they representing the buyer? And are they going to try to convince you to sell at a lesser price or plant that fear that, well, if here's the price, this is my buyer's price, you can take it or leave it, because that's who they're representing. That was their first contact. Their contact with you was because they already have a relationship, and hopefully under buyer's contract, a buyer agreement or contract with a client already. So a lot of times, and I know when I first got into real estate, I didn't get listings because another agent who I was in competition with said, I have a buyer. But they use that as bait to get the contract signed for the listing, only to say, yeah, my buyer went through and they weren't interested. We'll find you a buyer. And that's so frustrating. And I just don't agree along with it. So I don't misrepresent. My job as a listing agent is to market the property to as many people and as vast of a market as I possibly can, or audience, so that I don't care where the buyer finds it or who they come through. My job is to provide an attractive marketing representation, not to bait you or plant the fear of lawsuit. I have a buyer, you better list with me.
I do see people that become instantly frustrated. They list their house, so it's on again, off again, on again, off again. Let's try this agent. Let's try that agent. In this particular scenario that I watched, the house was off the market again. And then, of course, I got a buyer. As it turns out, this is the agent that the wife likes. And the purchaser just needed a house right away, but they didn't want to pay probably $850 for this house. They came in around $5 and change. So the homeowners, because they're on again, off again for 2 or 3 years, didn't understand that their house had gone up by $100,000-$300,000. And the other thing they didn't realize is the on again, off again, Murphy's Law dictates, when is a buyer going to appear? When you're off the market.
Oh, yes, because they're in a panic now.
Right. So they're like, oh, well, our house never sold. So the best way to succeed at life is if something doesn't work, you just quit, right? Isn't
Yes.
that what Tiger Woods said and all these famous athletes? Well, if you're no good at golfing the first day, just quit. Jimmy Page, imagine if Jimmy Page played one song in his guitar and said, that's it, I'm quitting, I'm no good at this. This is what you get from home sellers. These people ended up in a rental. They've been in a rental ever since because they had debt, and it's all because the wife liked the agent, ended up selling the house for less because of, I got a buyer. Do your research, reverting back to the first conversation, have an appraisal done.
Yeah, have an appraisal done and know that it is a sliding scale as well. The appraisal, market evaluation is all based on historical data, and it is subject to change, whether a week from now, a month from now, a year from now. It is a sliding scale, and it will change.
Patty, I paid too much for my house. I'm losing money, so I want the commission to be discounted. Can you give us a list of 5 really good reasons why this is completely idiotic to discount the commission? Because not only are you discounting it for yourself, you're discounting it for your broker so he can't pay his electrical bills and insurance and operating costs and staff, but you're also discounting it for the purchaser's agent. So if they're commission shopping, they're not going to show it. Inevitably, you're probably going to end up with less for this house. Penny-wise, pound-foolish home seller thinking they're saving money by not listing at 6%, they're listing at 4% or something else. This is not wise business.
No, and the money's going to have to come from somewhere. Our real estate fees, which, we call our marketing fees, because as a listing brokerage, what is it that we're actually doing with the promise? We don't get paid anything until it sells. So as a good listing agent, they're out of money as soon as they take on that listing, and they're confident that they're going to be compensated, hopefully that the seller works with them. They're able to put the property on the market at a reasonable fair market value, because if it's overpriced and you've just put a couple $1,000s worth of marketing into it. You sit for a year. Well, guess what? Your time, all the calls that you're back and forth with the seller trying to justify why it hasn't sold yet, plus all the marketing expenses, because our photographer and our marketing team doesn't say, well, when you sell it, you can pay us. No, they want to be compensated as soon as they do the job. You're out all that money. So if you're going to look at a discount brokerage, please, or a discount agent, please know if they're going to be agreeing to work with you at a reduced rate, they're just taking the money from another pot. So I'm going to take the photos myself. Now I've just saved myself anywhere from, $350 to $500 there. I'm just going to send up I got a brother with a drone. I'm just going to send him up and he's just going to do a quick few drone shots, which again, I might give him, I don't know, a few bucks, a case of beer or whatever, a thing of mussels as compensation. So now I'm still keeping a little bit more money in my pocket here. These are the things that you may not realize by listing for a discounted fee, we'll just call it, you are compromising an attractive and professional marketing representation. I've been with buyers probably about a month and a half ago where we were looking at properties. And one of the properties, and it was so interesting, one of the properties that I thought was a good fit for them, I ended up including in the list. We went through it. And the husband, when we pulled up at the property, he goes, I'll just let you know, Patty, we seen this, but we took it off the list. And I said, well, why did you take it off the list? And they said, well, the pictures didn't look very good, so we weren't going to bother. Well, it turned out to be one of the properties that kind of just, wow, I had no idea it looked so nice. And for me, it was such a lesson. And I remember going back and telling Michael, I cannot believe that this particular property that shows so well in person, they had the wrong composition. They had the pictures going vertical instead of horizontal. They had them crooked. They had them dark. They had them at odd angles, capturing just pieces of the home instead of the room. These particular buyers who were qualified buyers bypassed that property on the MLS on a realtor.ca because of the photos. And you know what? That particular property, when I looked at the commissions, I thought, what is the seller paying for this marketing representation? It made sense because it was discounted fees.
Back in the early days, when we used to show houses on horseback, the house builders that were building new houses had this brainiac idea, and I'm sure a few of them still do. I know you've come across some recently, that think by discounting the commission, or I should say, just stepping back, they felt because they're house builders, because they were selling multiple homes, that they're entitled to a discount on the commission. They all learned one important lesson. Do you know what that is?
What's that?
Most of these properties at that time would be listed at 4%. All the other houses would typically be listed at 6%, with few exceptions. The agents wouldn't show the 4% commissions because they commission shop. No different than you looking at two jobs that are exactly the same. One's paying $50 an hour, one's paying $27. Which one are you going to take, assuming everything is the same?
You're obviously going to take the higher.
Right. So the agents would blacklist the builders. The builders would say, geez, this house isn't selling. It must be the price. And I remember, in fact, the one builder, unfortunately, he's passed away, came to the realization, I'm discounting this house $30, $40, $50, $60,000 and it's not selling. And back then that was 10 to 20%. So they're losing money on this house. Chances are it's even financed. They all came to the conclusion that cutting the commission, you're sort of shooting yourself in the head. So I'll just leave it at that. We're trying to tie these episodes up to 35 minutes.
I do want to just quick and add to that.
We can't add because this is over.
Because
End of episode.
I just feel and you have your opinion, and that's the benefit of having this being the Michael and Patty show, is here's Patty's opinion. As much as, yes, I do look at the fees, I do not discriminate on a property if I feel it's going to suit my client's needs. I service my client first, and I do feel, as hopefully the majority of real estate professionals on the planet look at taking care of their client first. They shouldn't be going, well, this one's at X percent or X, as a flat rate, whatever the compensation is, I'm not going to show it. I really hope, because I don't want the consumers to think this is how we're wired. I do look after my clients first. If it is a home that I feel would probably suit their needs, they're getting into that home. I'm sending it to them. It is disappointing. This particular home, like I just told you, it was at a discounted fee, but it did check all their boxes, and I did bring them through because I truly wanted to find my client a home for their family. The seller was none the wiser that their marketing representation, you might get all excited because your house is on the internet and you get to see your pictures and that. Please know that your photos are costing you money that you thought you were saving by discounting the real estate fees because you feel that they're getting, as an industry, are overpaid. There's a lot of expenses. I lose listings probably once or twice a year where I'm out about $2,000 at least on that listing, at least. And I don't get that recompensated back. I just have to move on to the next one. And it happens. It's a balancing game here of fees and I guess I'll just say fees and fun, which can be a little chaotic sometimes.
Let me ask you a question, if I may.
Okay.
You don't see much of this happening these days, at least in my experience. What are your thoughts on the selling bonus? You see this more in markets that are strongly leaning towards the buyer's advantage. In other words, houses aren't selling. So what are your feelings if you're saying agents shouldn't shop on commissions on a selling bonus? And what this is for the audience, someone selling a house, let's say it's $200,000, they basically say, we're going to give a 6% commission plus $5,000 if you find us a buyer, and they usually have a time limit of in the next week, 2 weeks, a month, whatever.
Okay, so I'm just going to say...
So that contradicts everything you're saying, because now we're giving them an added bonus.
I am sorry, but without getting into percentage numbers, I disagree against selling bonuses. I feel, and again, if you're a seller listening to this and you're having this conversation right now with your listing agent, and your listing agent's going, well, let's put a selling bonus. I'm going to tell you right now, the selling bonus is not going to make me push one of my clients to buy your property so I can get paid, because I'm not servicing my client. And if I did have a client that was interested in your property, I don't need to have a selling bonus to convince them. If we have a buyer interested in your particular property or product that you have offered, we're going to bring them through. We're going to, because the buyer is going to insist, I want to see that property. I don't have to be baited to work. I am working on behalf of my clients, trying to find them the right property. Yes, it makes it a little bit more, again, if it's a piece of land and you've got a low commission on a piece of land, and I'm going to walk away with such a small amount, and here it's going to take me hours of driving to go up and check out that property, either meet my client there, write the contract, do all the stuff that's involved. You really do need to make sure that they're compensated. I won't go show those properties if it's a cheap piece of land, like a cheap commission on a piece of land. I'll just tell my clients, go up and take a look at it, because it's not serving me to spend hours and hours driving or walking a property that they're offering you a couple $100 on.
Getting back to the selling bonus, do you know what my opinion is on it?
No, but I know you're going to share it.
It's exactly what you said, which is why I don't think I've ever done a selling bonus that I can remember. I may have a long time ago because I, like many of the real estate agent lemmings, thought, oh, they're doing it, so I should do it when I started. But I don't remember ever doing a selling bonus because I always figured that if the buyer wants to buy it, they're going to buy it. And it's also a conflict of interest. That's it.
Well, I was going to say, I had a situation where the listing agent convinced the seller to put a selling bonus on it.
And then they sold it themselves.
No. And then fast forward to closing, because I sold the property. They just put the selling bonus up the day or 2 days before I scheduled my viewing. I felt kind of bad for these guys because this property was already on their list. But now they're giving away more money, which they didn't have to do because the buyer will present themselves if the property is marketed and is being offered at fair market value. And fast forward to closing date, it turned out they didn't have enough money to cover the bonus. And the listing agent didn't ask to make sure, how much do you have in mortgage? How much do you have? Here's the real estate fees. Just do a quick summary. They were short. So then they set up a payment plan to pay this selling bonus, which it was all under contract and the amount was all written in. So they did end up paying it, but make sure that you can afford it as well, because that was, it was very upsetting.
Thanks for listening to the show. Have a great day. That's it.
That's it. Thanks again for listening. We appreciate each and every one of you. And if you do want an extension of this, we do have the Facebook group Moving to Prince Edward Island from the Michael and Patty podcast, which is an extension of this filled with fun facts, Toolbox Tuesday, Fun Fact Friday, and summaries of every single one of these episodes. So again, thanks for listening.